Hey guys, what's going on? It's Jordan here. Welcome back to the channel. Thank you for stopping by. I recently just hit 100 subscribers, so if you guys watch this, I want to say a huge thank you to everybody that has subscribed to me. I honestly, when I first started YouTube, I really didn't think that it was really gonna like take off, but I feel that getting 100 subscribers is a huge thing, even to somebody that has really only been doing this for such a short time. I would say that it is absolutely huge, and I mean, thank you guys so much. Really, I'm kind of at a loss for words. I really didn't ever think that I would even get 100 subscribers, to be honest with you. So today, I am going to be talking about probably one of my favorite lenses. This is the Canon EOS 24mm lens. So let's go ahead and get into it. Now, this lens right here is fairly inexpensive, probably one that I think everybody should have in their kit along with a 50mm lens. So this lens was designed specifically for APS-C size cameras or crop sensor cameras, so it's not able to be used on a full frame camera. But I'm going to go ahead and dive into some of the pros and cons of this. So let's go ahead and start. Now, most notably, it is super tiny. So, I mean, literally, you can throw this thing into your pocket. Like, let's say if you're doing like some street photography or something, you could basically just throw this into your pocket and not even really have to worry about it. Obviously, you're probably going to want to keep the back cap on. So this way you're not scratching the rear elements and the lens cap for the front element. So obviously you don't want to do that. You don't want to mess up your lens. Nice thing about it is an f2.8. Now, while f2.8 isn't super bright in low light situations, it does still offer a pretty decent amount of light to come through. Especially for a budget lens, I would say that that's a pretty good deal. It's not a 1.8 like the Canon 50mm f1.8 is, but I still think that this serves a really good purpose. For as small and as light as it is, I really feel that if you don't have one of these, maybe pick one up. It's actually a pretty sharp lens, even at an f2.8. You're not going to get some crazy bokeh, but it still does the trick. Now, you can buy one of these new for, I think they're like 130 on like Canon's website. You might be able to find them new for a little bit cheaper at other places. I was looking on Canon's website, so this is $19.99 new. So if you want to buy a brand new out of the box, or they have refurbished ones, they're like 89 bucks, which I think is a pretty good deal. You can actually find these probably on like the Facebook Marketplace, eBay, maybe even like B&H that are refurbished for probably somewhere I would say around 50 to 70 bucks. I purchased this one from another local photographer in the area, and she was selling it for I think like 70. I think I paid for it, so I still think it was a pretty good option. It's definitely nice to have a prime lens at 24. This is good for all types of things. You can do portraits with these, you can do landscape photography, you can do astrophotography, product photography, so it's a pretty versatile lens. Depending on how you're looking to use it, I would think that you could probably get some pretty decent results. When it's on the Canon crop sensor, you're looking at equivalently 38 millimeters, which is pretty good. I mean, it's not super telephoto. I would say it's probably somewhere in the middle between like a wide and a medium telephoto. I know in Hollywood they use the 40 millimeter, which is basically like the go-to lens for pretty much all movies. Um, Now, don't quote me on this. I'm sure that they probably use other ones, but from all the research that I've done and some of the like the documentaries and stuff that I've watched on YouTube and some other things from like other directors and cinematographers, 40 millimeter is a pretty much go-to for any focal length while recording movies. So that's something to consider, especially if you're trying to like do, videography or something. Um, it's like I said, it's not probably the best for an f2.8, but I mean, you still get the job done, and it can still shoot in a pretty decent amount of low light situations. Now, this has a minimum focusing distance of half a foot, so if you're trying to do like macro shots, it's pretty good. You can get pretty close to objects, so I mean, even like product photography, that's why I said this is pretty good for product photos. I've used it, so like I dabble in product photos and stuff, and like I do a lot of like beer photography. I know that sounds weird, maybe like some sort of a niche that maybe not a lot of people are into, but I've used this lens countless times to do like beer photography and stuff. So it works pretty well, especially with how wide the focal length is on this. You get some pretty solid shots. Now, since it is an EFS lens, the autofocusing motors that Canon uses, this is probably one of the quietest lenses that I have that autofocuses. I mean, there's basically almost next to no noise when using like in a continuous autofocus. So I have the Canon EOS Rebel SL3 or the 250D or the 200D Mark II or the Kiss X10, whatever you want to call that. 17 different name camera, but so when I'm using this on that camera to do like any sort of videography, I can throw this on there and use it and not have to worry about like really any autofocus noise, which is nice. So that was pretty much a lot of the pros that I wanted to go over with this. Now let me go ahead and get into the cons. So basically the number one con with this lens right here is it is only specifically designed for APS-C size sensors. So basically any Canon crop sensor cameras, basically like their budget DSLR lineups. This is pretty much all that it is really designed to be worked with. As far as I know, if you're using it on a full frame, like let's say you had a Canon, like a Canon mirrorless full frame camera, like an EOS RP or an EOS R or something. If you buy an adapter, you can still use this on the camera, but the thing of it is the image has to be cropped in. So I think what I was doing a little bit of research, so the Canon EOS RP, if you have the adapter to go from the EF mount to the RF mount, you can still use the EFS lenses, but the problem with those is you can only use it in a cropped scenario just because of the way that the lens is designed, as opposed to, which I don't have one right now, but so like the Canon 50mm f1.8 has the little red dot up here. That is designed for full frame cameras. This little white square up here is designed for specifically the APS-C size bodies. So that's something to consider if you are purchasing this lens and maybe plan to upgrade to a mirrorless full frame camera or even just like a full frame DSLR from Canon. You probably aren't going to be able to use this, but it's always nice, especially if you keep your APS-C crop sensor camera and it's just like a backup. I probably am not ever going to get rid of the SL3, so I'll probably keep that, and I'll probably keep a couple of the EFS lenses to go with it. Now, I don't know if this is necessarily considered a con, but it's something to me. The filter ring size on this is a 52mm. So I have two ND filters that are 58mm rings, and this is a 52. So rather than going out and purchasing an entire other set of 52mm ND filters and polarizing filters, I went and I purchased some step down rings. So it goes from 58 to 52, which honestly, I made a video about that probably 6 or so months ago, but it's a really good option if you don't want to go out and purchase a bunch of different ND filters or polarizing filters for different size lenses. If you don't know, you can buy a ring that fits onto this and then it attaches to your ND filter. So it goes from, like I said, mine are 58mm, they go down to 52, and then I don't really have a problem with that. So they fit on and they work basically just how any other regular ND filter is. I don't have any sort of vignetting or anything from the ring. So keep that in mind. Like I mentioned earlier, so this is an f2.8 lens. Now, like I said, it is a pro and a con. F2.8 is good. It's not super great in low light situations. You can still use it. It'll still work. But there are certain instances where I'm always like, if I'm shooting in like a really low light situation, I generally try to stick around 1600. But sometimes the aperture doesn't open up wide enough to let in enough exposure or enough light to really expose the image properly. So that's something to consider too. I know that Canon has other more expensive full frame 24mm lens options, but when I was looking on Canon's website earlier, the other cheaper 24mm I think was like $600 for the full frame equivalent. So maybe keep that in mind if you don't want to spend a whole lot. If you are cool with just crop sensor cameras, I mean, maybe invest in the EF 24mm. I know it's pretty pricey. Maybe you look at Sigma or Rokinon, Samyang, Tamron even. I mean, there are other lens options out there if you don't want to stick purely to Canon. Not to say that Canon's not good and they don't make really good lenses, but sometimes you can always get a better deal from a different manufacturer of lenses and still get what you're looking for an inexpensive price, and maybe even like some really nice shallow depth of field for maybe about the same price, if not a little bit less than what Canon's 24mm, I think it's an f1.4 or an f1.8 for the full frame sensor cameras is, but yeah, just something to keep in mind. And one last thing that I want to get into is, so this is definitely a con. Now, the Canon EOS Rebel SL3, the one that I basically is like my main shooter for pretty much all of like my paid gigs, I guess I would say, and what I use to record all of my YouTube videos with. There's no image stabilization on this lens. So if image stabilization is something that you really need, especially if you're doing like a lot of handheld shots, maybe consider something like a zoom lens. Now, what I'm shooting on right now is the 18 to 55 kit lens. So I'm shooting at an f4 right now at an ISO of 400. Now I could probably go lower if I turn this light up in front of me here, but I don't really want to like blow out the side of my face, which it's probably a little overexposed right now to begin with. Anyways, so there are definitely options out there. You can probably get what you're looking for at the cost of aperture, and if you're willing to shoot at an f4, which is not terrible, low light situation wise, I mean, you're probably going to need to bump up either your shutter speed or your ISO pretty high with that, especially if you're shooting in like a really low light situation. But if you have image stabilization on, I mean, realistically, you should be able to hold it at 1/30th of a second, 1/40th of a second, and still get a pretty crisp image out of it. So just something to keep in mind. With the f2.8, I mean, you could easily open the aperture up to an f2.8 and still hold this handheld at probably like a 1/40th to 1/60th, maybe 1/80th of a second, and still get a pretty decent image. Just something to consider when you're purchasing lenses. So yeah, that's pretty much it. If you guys enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up, give it a like. If you didn't like it, also give it a thumbs up. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit all the buttons, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.